Looking for primary research, dear students, we have been discussing this point that there are position papers available in publications, and there are concept papers which are written by experts, research scholars. So in this session, we are going to discuss that what are position papers and how can we differentiate between a position paper and a primary research. And then we would also discuss that what are the problems with using position papers in your research as evidence or as proofs in order to address your research questions. Okay, so position papers are basically those publications which are written by experts on the basis of primary researches which are carried out by others, right? So the experts who are writing down position papers, they are not actually doing the research themselves, but they are using studies which are conducted by others. Okay, so in this perspective, position papers are just like literature reviews. Okay, like literature reviews are the summaries of or the commentaries of research which is existing, which is done by others, and we are just reviewing them for the sake of background information or just in order to provide some of the proofs or some of the evidences, right? In position papers, actually the writers are arguing and they are taking their own positions on the basis of existing literature, right? On various issues which are related to their topic, which are the part of their discipline, their specialist area. Okay, so they would be commenting on issues just in the light of existing literature, primary literature, but which is done by others, and they are just using those secondary sources, and on the basis of those secondary sources they are providing information and they are taking position. Okay, so position papers are not basically primary research, right? Because it is a kind of secondary research, as the authors are not doing research, but they are just using primary researches done by others. So their own work is basically the secondary source or the secondary research. Most of the time, the position papers, when they are written by experts, others, research scholars like you, students, and other research scholars, they can use those position papers in order to propose answers to research questions, and then in order to hypothesize about some of the issues, some of the problems which are their topics for research, right? So position papers can be used for proposing answers to research questions, and they can be used for generating hypotheses, right? Or hypotheses related to particular topics, right? But there are some risks involved when you are using position papers. Then what you are basically doing that you are using those position papers as your proposed answers in the light of others' research, others' positions, right? But there is a trap, there is a risk involved, right? And that trap is technically called circular reasoning, right? So the trap of circular reasoning must be avoided, right? How? Let me explain this to you, that you may be using a position paper, which is some expert's position in the light of existing literature, just in generating hypothesis, right, related to your own research question. So you can form a hypothesis in the light of position papers, and then you must not be using the same position papers in order to justify your hypothesis. So as far as the hypothesizing is concerned, as far as the proposing of an answer is concerned, that's okay, but you cannot use position papers twice, right? So for forming hypothesis, the formulation of hypothesis may be done in the light of position papers, but then you need to go for primary research and collect your own data, right? So this collection of your own data is important in the area of research. You cannot hypothesize and then, just support your hypothesis. So you cannot actually use twice those position papers, which is called circular reasoning. So you may not be using circular reasoning because position papers they cannot be substitute to primary research. In scientific studies, we need to go for, primary research, right? As far as the observation is concerned, as far as the hypothesizing is concerned, that is possible on the basis of position papers. But then you must be, just creating your own research design and collecting your own research data. And then you would be justifying, you would be just, proving your given hypothesis with the help of your own primary data. So that's an important point. And there is another risk because position papers, we know that they are similar to literature reviews. They are the summaries which are developed by others, right? So you cannot actually use their eyes. So what you are basically doing, you are using their eyes. So you cannot be using their own eyes for justifying your, proving your research questions and proving your hypothesis, right? So we need to have a very clear-cut difference. And let me just explain this with the help of a figure which is given in your textbook, and you must be, just using it and understanding it, okay? So this is basically the relation between position paper and primary research. Remember, guys, that position papers like this one, as it is shown here, that a position paper is always prepared by experts in the light of research studies, like study number 1, study number 2, study number 3. And remember that these are basically the primary researches which are conducted by others, which are carried out by others. So study number 1, study 2, study 3, they are used by experts who prepared position papers. They are using those primary researchers in order to take a position and then proposing answers and arguing their own position and then forming hypotheses, right? So up till this point, it is okay if you are using others' research, right? And if you are using position papers. But then in order to prove your hypothesis, which you form on the basis of these studies, you are required to go for primary research, right? Which is divided by this dotted line. Because here we need to go for primary research in order to provide support and in order to prove our hypotheses, right? So in order to find answers to our questions, we cannot actually use these position papers twice. And this is called circular reasoning. The trap of circular reasoning is this. Like, you can be using these studies and these position papers for your hypotheses, but then you are required to go to primary research, right? So that's an important point. You can use them once for proposing an answer, for arguing a position, for forming a hypothesis, but you cannot actually justify your answers, your position and your hypothesis with the help of position papers. You are required to go for primary research. So you may not be using them, you must not be using them double, right? For proposing and then for justifying. For justifying and for proving, you must be going for primary research. That's the main difference between position paper and primary research.